The fluorescent lights of the subway cast ghostly shadows in the empty tunnels, and the echo of the last night trains reverberated like mechanical phantoms. Mei Lin adjusted her worn guitar against her chest, feeling the cold of the metal seep through her thin jacket. Her fingers, numb from the Korean winter, could barely find the familiar chords. "Just one more night," she murmured to herself in Mandarin, the words forming small clouds of vapor in the icy air. It had been 3 months since she'd paid rent for her tiny basement room in Hongdae. 3 months since she lost her job at the convenience store for being late one too many times. 3 months living off coins tossed by hurried strangers who barely glanced in her direction. Gangnam-gu Station was nearly deserted at 2 in the morning. Only a few night workers and drunken students passed by occasionally, their footsteps echoing off the white ceramic walls. Mei Lin chose her usual spot near the tunnel entrance, where the acoustics amplified her soft yet melancholy voice. Her hands found the strings and began playing a melody her grandmother had taught her in Beijing, years before she came to Korea chasing a dream that now felt as distant as the stars. Her voice, sweet as honey and sorrowful like a lament, began to fill the empty space. Zai zhe ge jie jiao, wadeng ni. On this corner, I wait for you. The song spoke of lost hope, of dreams that crumble like autumn leaves. Every note carried the weight of her loneliness, every word a silent plea to the universe for a second chance. Mei Lin closed her eyes, letting the music carry her far away from that cold, hostile reality. That's when she saw him. A man in a dark suit stood motionless about 10 meters away, leaning against a marble column. His eyes, even in the dim light, seemed to shine with an intensity that made her lose her rhythm for a moment. He didn't move, didn't clap, didn't leave coins. He simply watched, as if hypnotized by something only he could see. Mei Lin kept singing, but now her attention was split. The man was tall, with refined Eastern features, probably Japanese, judging by the impeccable haircut and rigid posture. His hands were tucked into the pockets of a wool coat that likely cost more than she earned in an entire month. But it was his eyes that intrigued her, deep, almost black, filled with a sorrow she recognized instantly. It was the same sorrow she saw in the mirror every morning. 4:43 minutes, she sang. Chinese ballads her grandmother had taught her, Korean songs she learned from television, even a few Japanese classics she had managed to memorize. The man stood there the entire time, unmoving like a statue, drinking in each note as if it were water in the desert. When she finally stopped, exhausted, she waited for him to approach. Perhaps he would leave a few coins, perhaps say something. But the man simply observed her for a few more seconds, inclined his head ever so slightly in a gesture of silent gratitude, and vanished into the tunnel's shadows. Mei Lin looked at her guitar case. 3 101 coins and a crumpled 1001 note. Not even enough to buy a hot coffee. She sighed, packed up her instrument, and prepared for another night sleeping on the station bench, using old newspapers as a blanket. She didn't know that, from the shadows, the mysterious man was still watching. She didn't know that Hiroshi Nakamura, CEO of the largest record label in Japan, had just found something he'd been searching for over 5 years. She didn't know her voice had touched a part of his soul he thought had died forever. And she definitely didn't know that, in the inner pocket of Hiroshi's coat, there was a blank check he had almost signed that very moment. In his penthouse apartment overlooking the Han River, he stood on the balcony smoking cigarettes he didn't even want, listening to the echo of a voice he couldn't get out of his mind. It was 4 in the morning and Seoul was asleep, but his thoughts were in turmoil. He had come to Korea for a business meeting that could expand his record label into the K-pop market, but what he'd found in the subway was something entirely different. The purity of that voice, the raw pain in the words sung in Mandarin, the way she closed her eyes and surrendered completely to the music, it all awakened feelings he had buried long ago. Yuki! He murmured the name he hadn't spoken in 5 years, and his hand instinctively went to the pocket where he kept an old, faded photograph. His fiancée, killed in a car accident 3 days before their wedding. She had also sung, also dreamed of being discovered. She too had that same vulnerability in her eyes. Hiroshi crushed the cigarette in a crystal ashtray and went back inside. His apartment was a museum of loneliness, expensive but soulless furniture, white walls decorated with music awards and photographs of famous artists, a kitchen he never used because he always dined alone at luxury restaurants. Everything perfect. Everything empty. He opened his laptop and started searching. He didn't know the girl's name, but he knew the subway schedules, the stations, the usual spots where street musicians performed. He found online forums for independent artists, Facebook groups for foreign musicians in Seoul, lists of licensed performers. Nothing. She was a ghost, existing only in the underground tunnels of the city. At 7 in the morning, his assistant Tanaka called from Tokyo. "Nakamura-san, the meeting with SM Entertainment has been moved to tomorrow. You have one more free day in Seoul. Shall I reschedule your flight?" "No," Hiroshi replied, surprised by the firmness in his own voice. "I'm staying a few more days. I have some personal matters to take care of." Personal matters? Tanaka had known his boss for 8 years and knew he didn't have a personal life. "Can I help with anything?" "No. Take care of the company. I'll be unavailable for a few nights." After hanging up, Hiroshi took a shower and chose more casual clothes. He couldn't show up at the subway station in a suit again, it would draw too much attention. He put on dark jeans, a black t-shirt, and a leather jacket. He looked in the mirror and barely recognized himself. How long had it been since he'd dressed like this? How long since he'd done something impulsive? He spent the entire day walking through Seoul, visiting music stores, talking to vendors about street artists, asking discreet questions. He discovered that many foreign musicians were undocumented, working with expired student visas or as tourists. He also found out that the authorities often turned a blind eye as long as there was no trouble. At 10 at night, he was back at Gangnam-gu Station. He bought coffee from a vending machine and positioned himself strategically behind a column where he could observe without being seen. He waited. Midnight. Nothing. 1 in the morning. A few musicians came and went, but none of them were her. 2 a.m. Hiroshi began to think she wouldn't come. Maybe she performed at different times, or at other stations. Maybe that previous night had just been a coincidence. And then he saw her. Mei Lin descended the stairs slowly, carrying her guitar as if it were the weight of the world. She looked even more fragile than the night before, and Hiroshi noticed she was wearing the same clothes. It was probably all she had. She sat up in the same spot, tuned her guitar, and began to sing. This time, she chose a different song, a Japanese ballad that Hiroshi recognized instantly. It was Tsugaru Kaikyo Fuyujishiki, a song about separation and longing that his grandmother used to hum. But the way Mei Lin interpreted it was unique. Her pronunciation wasn't perfect, but there was a pure emotion that transcended language barriers. She sang with her heart, not just her voice. Hiroshi closed his eyes and let himself be carried away. For a moment, it was as if Yuki were there, singing just for him. For a moment, the pain he had carried for 5 years lessened. When he opened his eyes, he realized there were tears on his face. After 2 hours, Mei Lin stopped. Hiroshi saw her count the coins in her guitar case with a discouraged expression. It wasn't enough, obviously. It never was. He waited until she packed her guitar and started walking. Then, discreetly, he followed. Mei Lin didn't go home. Instead, she headed to a 24-hour McDonald's and bought only a cup of coffee, sitting at a corner table. Hiroshi sat at another table, pretending to read a newspaper. For 3 hours, she remained there, warming her hands on the cup and dozing off occasionally. When the place became too crowded with the morning rush, she left and walked to a nearby park. Hiroshi followed from a distance, watching as she lay down on a bench, using the guitar as a pillow and newspapers as a blanket. Her breath formed small clouds in the cold air, and she trembled even in her sleep. It was then that he knew, he couldn't just watch. He had to do something. But what? Approaching her directly might scare her. She was clearly vulnerable, and he was a stranger. Giving her money would feel like charity, and there was pride in her eyes that he respected. Hiroshi stood watching Mei Lin sleep on the park bench until the sun rose, formulating a plan that would change both their lives forever. He didn't know it yet, but he was about to cross a line from which there would be no return. Hiroshi pasó os próximos tres días criando uma rutina obsesiva. Acordava as 5 da tarde, como vampiro moderno, e dedicava suas noites observer Mei Lin. Estudo sus habitos, mapu suas rotas, memorizo sus horarios. Descobriu que ela cantava de segunda a sexta na estação Gangnam-gu, aos sábados tentava a sorte em Myeongdong, e aos domingos geralmente descansava no Parque Hangang. Também descobriu que ela estava desesperada. Na quarta-feira, veio a revirar lixiras procurando garrafas plásticas para reciclar. Na quinta-feira, observou a hesitar por longos minutos diante de uma loja de penhores, segurando pequeno collar dourado, provavelmente a única lembrança de valor que possuía. Na sexta-feira, presença segurança do metro confiscar temporariamente sua guitarra por neo ter licença para se apresentar. Hiroshi sentiu uma fúria incontrolável. Seguiu o segurança 8 sua pausa para o almoço e se aproximou, falando corano fluente que poucos estrangeiros dominavam. Quanto? Perdeu. Quanto para você devolver a guitarra para a garota e fazer vista grossa quando ela canta? O segurança o estudo com desconfiança. Você é quem? Alguém que aprecia música. Hiroshi tirou uma nota de 50.0001 do bolso. Isto é suficiente para sua tolerância? Por uma semana, respondeu o segurança, embolsando o dinheiro rapidamente. Por mes, disse Hiroshi, colocando mais duas notas na mesa. E se algo acontecer com ela enquanto canta, você me liga neste número. Ele deslizou cartão de visita com apenas número de telefone. O segurança olhou para o dinheiro e assentiu. Mais tarde, Hiroshi observou a distância enquanto Mei Lin recebia sua guitarra de volta. Expresso de alivio mscu rosto foi como uma punhalada mscu coração. Ela não sabia que havia anjo de guarda en asombros, garantindo que pelo menos uma preocupação fosse eliminada de sua vida. Mas Hiroshi queria fazer mais. Muito mais. Começou a pesquisar sobre ela de forma mais sistemática. Contratou investigador privado discreto que descobriu sua história. Mei Lin Chen, 23 anos, nascida em Beijing, orfa aos 15, veio para a Coreia com visto de estudante para cursar música na Universidade Nacional de Seoul. Abandonou os estudos quando o dinheiro acabou, perdeu o visto, tornou-se indocumentada. Nem uma família, nem apoio, nem uma rede de segurança. Investigação também revelou seu talento. Ela havia sido aceita com bolsa integral, suas notas eram excepcionais, e seus professores a consideravam uma das alunas mais promissoras da década. Tudo jogado fora por falta de recursos financeiros. Hiroshi sentiu uma mistura de raiva e determinação. Aquela garota tinha dom que estava sendo desperdicado por circunstâncias cruéis. Ele tinha o poder de mudar isso, mas precisava ser cuidadoso. Muito cuidadoso. Na sexta-feira à noite, implementou a primeira phase de SCU pleno. Mei Lin estava SCU posto habitual, cantando uma verso acústica de The Moon Represents My Heart Mandarim. Sua voz estava rouca, provavelmente por causa do frio, mas ainda assim hipnotizante. Hiroshi observou por uma hora antes de se afastar. 20 minutos depois, homem de meia idade se aproximou de Mei Lin. Ele usava roupas casuais mas caras, e falava coreano com sotaque americano. Desculpe interromper, disse ele educadamente. Eu sou James Park, produtor musical independent. Ouvi você cantando e fiquei impressionado. Você tem representação. Mei Lin parou de tocar, confusa. Representação. Agente, empresário. Alguém que tsueda de sua carreira. Eu, neo tenho carreira, respondeu ela coreano hesitant. So canto aqui. James sorriu. Bame, talvez sea hora de mudar isso. Tenho uma proposta para você. Na verdade, James Park era ator contratado por Hiroshi. Nas instrucos detalhadas que recebera, devia oferecer a Mei Lin pequeno contrato para canta eventos privados, nada muito específico, mas suficient para lhe dar esperança e algum dinheiro. Estou organizando uma série de apresenticos íntimas para cliente que prefere manter o anonimato, explica James. Ele ouviu falar do seu talento e gostaria de contratá-la para algumas performances privadas. Pagaria 500,0001 por apresentação. Os alhos de Mei Lin se irregularam. Era mais dinheiro do que ela via mes inteiro cantando no metro. Que tipo de apresenticos? Pergunto cautelosamente. Nada comprometido, eu garanto. Apenas você, sua guitarra e sua voz. O cliente é tímido. Prefere eventos pequenos, pessoas selecionadas. Muito respeitável. James entrega-lhe cartão profissional convincente e uma pasta com detalhes fictícios mas triviais. Pense sobre isso. Se estiver interessada, me liga amanhã. A primeira apresentação seria na próxima segunda-feira. Depois que James partiu, Mei Lin ficou parada por longos minutos, segurando o cartão como se fosse bilhete de loteria premiado. Hiroshi, observando de longe, viu esperança brilhar seus olhos pela primeira vez. Mas junto com a satisfação de ver-la feliz, sentiu também uma pontada de culpa. Estava manipulando a situação, criando uma realidade falsa. Era para o bem dela, tento se convencer. Era para lhe dar uma chance. Neo era stalking. Neo era obsesso doentia. Era protecao. Cuidado. Amor. O pelo menos era isso que ele dizia para si mesmo enquanto seguia ao McDonald's, onde ela passou a noite inteira acordada, relendo os papias que James lhe dera, sonhando como futuro que Hiroshi estava cuidadosamente orquestrando. Nas sombras, ele sorriu. A phase do plano estava completa. A phase 2 seria ainda mais ambiciosa. Nene momento considera o que aconteceria quando Mei Lin descobrisse a verdade. Segunda-feira chegou com uma velocidade cruel. Mei Lin havia passado o fim de semana inteiro estado de ansiedade e expectativa que ela não sentia rameses. Usou suas últimas modas para comprar sabonete e shampoo. Tomo banho no banheiro público de uma estação de metro. E tento deixar sua única roupa decente menos amarrotada. Assim de noite, conforme os instrucos, ela se dirigiu ao endereço que James Park havia fornecido. Pequeno café privado Gangnam, o tipo de lugar que pessoas ricas alugam para eventos íntimos. Quando chego, encontro James esperando na entrada. Mei Lin, que que você veio. Diz ele com sorriso que ela não conseguiu decifrar se era genuíno ou profissional. Você está linda. Ela não se sentia linda. Sentia-se terrificada. Mas também desesperadamente esperançosa. Onde está o cliente? Pergunto, observando o interior do café através das janelas de vidro fosco. Ele prefere permanecer discreto. Ficara uma mesa nos fundos, uma área mais reservada. Você cantará no pequeno palco que montamos, e ele apreciará a distância. A uma pessoa muito particular. James agaiu para dentro. O café estava vazio, exceto por alguns funcionários que pareciam ter sido instruídos a manter distância. Havia pequeno palco improvisado com uma única cadeira, microfone e equipamento de som profissional. Tudo muito mais elaborado do que Mei Lin esperava. Ele já chegou, sussurrou ela, notando que as luzes dos fundos estavam acesas mas não conseguia ver ninguém. Sim, ele está lá. Mas como eu disse, muito tímido. Prefere não ser visto ou apresentado. Apenas. Conte como você sabe canta. Sea você mesma. Nós sombras dos fundos do café. Hiroshi estava sentado uma mesa cuidadosamente posicionada onde podia ver perfeitamente, mas permanecia invisível para ela. Seu coração baixa como tambor louco. Havia orquestrado tudo perfeitamente, alugara o espaço, contraterra o pessoal, mesmo instalara sistema de som que captaria cada nuance de sua voz. Mei Lin se dirigiu ao palco com passos hesitantes. Ela havia preparado repertório de 5 músicas, uma mistura de baladas chinesas e japonesas que sabia que tocavam caracos. Neo sabia que havia escolhido exatamente as músicas que mais comoviam o homem que a observava. Boa noite, disse ela timidamente para o microfone, sua voz ecoando no espaço vazio. Eu sou Mei Lin, e obrigada por esta oportunidade. Hiroshi fechou os olhos, dixando sua voz envolve-lo como uma chuva morna após uma seca prolongada. Ela começou com Amo Li Hua, Flor de Jasmine, uma canção tradicional chinesa que sua avó cantava quando ela era criança. Sua voz, amplificada pelo sistema de som, revela nuances que os tunais do metro nunca permitiram que fossem ouvidas. Havia uma riqueza tonal, uma maturidade emocional que confirmava tudo o que Hiroshi suspeitava. Ela não era apenas uma cantora de rua talentosa, era uma artista verdadeira. Durante 40 minutos, Mei Lin cantou como se sua vida dependesse disso. E talvez dependesse. Cada nota era uma súplica, cada palavra uma oferta de sua alma. Ela cantou sobre amor perdido, sobre esperança, sobre solidão, sobre sonhos que se recusam a morrer mesmo quando tudo parece impossível. Hiroshi estava hipnotizado. Havia descoberto centenas de artistas ao longo de sua carreira, havia ouvido as vozes mais belas do mundo, mas nunca havia sentido algo assim. Era como se ela estivesse cantando diretamente para sua alma, curando feridas que ele nem sabia que ainda sangravam. Quando ela terminou, houve silêncio prolongado. Mei Lin olhou nervosamente para a área dos fundos, procurando alguma reação, algum sinal de aproveito. James apareceu do nada, aplaudindo. Magnífico, absolutamente magnífico. O cliente ficou encantado. Ela gosto. Pergunta Mei Lin, sua voz carregada de uma vulnerabilidade que partiu o coração de Hiroshi. Mas do que gosto. Quer contratá-la para mais apresenticos. 3 vezes por semana, sempre às 7 da noite. Mesmo formato, mesmo pagamento. Mei Lin não conseguiu conter as lágrimas. Serios? Ele realmente quer que eu continue cantando. Ele diz que você tem o dom mais raro que existe, a capacidade de fazer as pessoas sentirem que não estão sozinhas no mundo. A frase havia sido cuidadosamente preparada por Hiroshi, mas não estava mentindo. Era exatamente isso que sentia. James entregou-lhe envelope. Seu pagamento de hoje, mas adiantamento para a próxima semana. E isto aqui é pequeno presente do cliente. Dentro do envelope, além do dinheiro, havia uma nota caligrafia elegante. Sua voz é presente para o mundo. Nunca perde canta. Admirador. Mei Lin leu a nota 3 vezes, segurando-a como se fosse tesouro. Posso agradecer a ele pessoalmente? Ele prefere manter o anonimato, responde James rapidamente. Mas sua gratidão é transmitida através de sua música. Ele sente isso. Depois que Mei Lin partiu, Hiroshi permaneceu sozinho no café vazio, ainda ouvindo ecos de sua voz nas paredes. Havia criado a situação perfeita. Ele podia ouvi-la canta para ele, exclusivamente para ele, sem os distracos e ruídos do metro. Podia vê-la feliz, segura, esperançosa. Mas também sabia que estava construindo uma mentira elaborada. Mais cedo ou mais tarde, a verdade viria à tona. Aquesto era. Quando isso acontecesse, ella entenderia que tudo havia sido feito por amor? Ou se sentiria traída, manipulada, usada? Por ora, Hiroshi neo queria pensa nisso. Queria apenas esse perder na memoria daquela voz, daqueles olhos brilhando de esperança, daquele momento em que conseguiu fazer alguém que amava se sentir valorizada. Mesmo que ela neo soubesse que era amada. Mesmo que ela neo soubesse que ele existia. Ainda. 3 weeks had passed in a routine that had become addictive for them both. Mei Lin had found a rhythm of life she hadn't experienced in months. 3 performances a week earned her enough money to rent a small room in a boarding house, buy decent food, and even a few second-hand clothes. For the first time in a long time, she could sleep in a real bed. For Hiroshi, those nights had become the center of his existence. He had cancelled important meetings, postponed business trips, and reorganized his entire schedule around Mei Lin's performances. Tanaka, his assistant, was beginning to ask uncomfortable questions about his extended stay in Seoul. Nakamura-san, Universal Music is insisting on an in-person meeting in Tokyo. I can't delay it any longer, Tanaka said during a morning call. 1 more week, Hiroshi replied, watching Mei Lin through the window of his apartment. She was walking down the street, carrying a new guitar he had secretly arranged through James, supposedly a gift from a satisfied client. 1 more week. It's been 3 already. What the hell are you doing in Seoul? Business, Hiroshi said curtly, and hung up. But he knew he couldn't keep up the charade forever. His company needed him, and the longer he stayed, the more suspicion he drew. Besides, the deception was becoming increasingly elaborate and expensive. It wasn't sustainable. On Wednesday, something changed. Mei Lin arrived at the cafe as usual, but something in her demeanor was different. She seemed more confident, more self-assured. She had bought a new outfit, a simple but elegant dress that highlighted her natural beauty. She had done her hair and used a bit of makeup. She was transforming before Hiroshi's eyes. "Good evening," she said into the microphone, and her voice sounded stronger, more professional. "Tonight, I want to dedicate my first song to my mysterious client." Hiroshi felt his heart stop. "I don't know your name, I don't know what you look like, but I want you to know you've changed my life. A month ago, I was sleeping on park benches. Today, I have a home, I have hope, I have a future. This is for you." She began to sing Grateful Heart in Mandarin, but she had adapted the lyrics to include verses about an invisible guardian angel, about someone who appeared when she needed it most, about love that manifests through kindness. Hiroshi was frozen. She didn't know who he was, but she was singing with love. Not romantic love, but deep gratitude, genuine affection for the man who had saved her life. During the performance, he noticed she occasionally looked toward the area where he usually sat, as if trying to pierce the darkness, as if desperate to see the face of the one who had become so important in her life. After the performance, something unprecedented happened. Mei Lin didn't leave right away. Instead, she slowly walked toward the back of the cafe. "I know you're there," she said softly. "I know you can hear me. You don't have to show yourself if you don't want to, but I would really love to know more about you. Who are you? Why did you choose me? How can I repay such kindness?" Hiroshi was hidden behind a partition, only 3 meters away from her. He could hear her breathing, could smell her perfume, a cheap one bought with the money he had given her, but on her, it smelled like the most expensive flowers in the world. "I understand shyness," she continued. "I used to be very shy too, before I started singing on the streets. But loneliness is different. And I have a feeling that you're lonely, just like I used to be. Maybe we could, I don't know, be a little less lonely together." Her voice was trembling slightly, and Hiroshi realized she was crying. "You've given me so much," she whispered. "Let me give you something in return. Even if it's just friendship. Even if it's just someone who genuinely cares about you." Hiroshi closed his eyes, fighting the urge to step out of the shadows and reveal himself. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to go to her, to comfort her, to tell her he wasn't alone because she existed in his life. But he also knew that revealing himself now would ruin everything. How could he explain months of watching her? How could he justify all the manipulation, no matter how well-intentioned? She would see him as a stalker, a predator, a dangerous man who had built a fantasy around her. "Please," Mei Lin pleaded, her voice cracking. Just let me see you. You don't need to speak. You don't need to explain. I just want to know that you're real, that I'm not singing to a ghost." Hiroshi bit his lip until it bled. He had never experienced such exquisite torture. To be so close to the person he loved, to hear her begging for his presence, and not be able to respond. After long minutes of silence, Mei Lin sighed in resignation. "I understand. Maybe someday you'll be ready. I'll be here whenever you need me." She returned to the stage, picked up her guitar, and walked toward the exit. But before leaving, she turned one last time. "Thank you," she said into the darkness. "For everything. You're the most important person in my life, even if I don't know who you are." After she left, Hiroshi remained motionless in the shadows for a full hour. His hands trembled, his heart pounded out of rhythm, and his mind was in total chaos. James arrived to make the usual payment and found Hiroshi in a state of shock. "She's getting too attached," James said with concern. "She's starting to build a romantic fantasy around the mystery client. This could become problematic." "I know," Hiroshi murmured. "Maybe it's time to end this. We could say the client is traveling, that he no longer needs her services. Offer a generous final payment and close this cleanly." Hiroshi looked at the empty stage where Mei Lin had sung moments earlier. He could still feel her presence, still hear the echoes of her voice pleading for connection. "No," he said at last. "Not yet. Nakamura-san, with all due respect, you're playing with fire. She's developing real feelings. When she finds out the truth, she won't find out. Everything comes out eventually. And when it does, it'll destroy her. You're building a lie on top of a lie." Hiroshi knew James was right. But he also knew he couldn't stop. Mei Lin had become his drug, his obsession, his reason for existing. The idea of losing her, of returning to his empty life in Tokyo, was unbearable. "2 more weeks," he said. "Then we'll see." But deep in his heart, he knew that 2 weeks would become a month, and that a month would stretch indefinitely. He was trapped in a web of lies he had spun himself, and the more he tried to free himself, the more entangled he became. That night, Hiroshi couldn't sleep. He stood on the balcony of his apartment, staring in the direction of the boarding house where Mei Lin lived, imagining whether she was awake too, thinking about him, building fantasies about who he might be. What he didn't know was that, just a few kilometers away, Mei Lin was indeed awake, writing in a journal she had bought with the money he had given her. She was writing about her feelings for a man she had never seen, about how it was possible to love someone who existed only in the shadows. She was writing about how, for the first time in her life, she felt like someone was protecting her, caring for her, loving her in a pure and selfless way. She was writing about how she had fallen in love with a ghost. And Hiroshi, staring at the stars over Seoul, was falling even deeper in love with a woman who loved the idealized version of him that she had created in her mind. It was a perfect recipe for disaster. But it was also the most beautiful thing either of them had ever experienced in their lonely lives. The rain tapped against the cafe windows like tears from the sky, and Mei Lin nervously adjusted the strings of her guitar. It was her 10th private performance, and the mysterious client still hadn't shown his face. James, the supposed representative, looked increasingly tense. "Are you sure he's there?" Mei Lin asked, glancing toward the shadows in the corner where she knew her benefactor was hiding. "He's always there," James replied with a strained smile. He likes the intimacy of listening without being seen." Hiroshi, hidden behind a column, felt his heart tear apart. He had memorized every gesture Mei Lin made, every inflection in her voice. He had watched her blossom like a cherry tree in spring, while he remained stuck in the winter of his lie. Mei Lin began to sing a song she had composed that very morning, inspired by her feelings for the invisible man. In the shadows of my heart lives a love I cannot see, like the moon that lights my path, never showing its true being. The words pierced Hiroshi's soul like silk daggers. Every note was a confession of love directed at him, yet built on the shaky foundation of his deception. His hands trembled as he pulled out his phone and saw 15 missed calls from Tanaka. After the performance, Mei Lin approached the area where she knew he was. "I know you can't answer me," she whispered into the shadows, "but I want you to know you've changed my life. Not just because of the money or the opportunity, but because you've given me something I never had, the feeling that someone truly listens to me." Her eyes filled with tears. "My mother used to say that music is the language of the soul. When I sing for you, I feel like our souls touch, even if I can't see your face." Hiroshi closed his eyes, feeling his world collapse. Every word Mei Lin spoke was a stab of guilt and love combined. When she left, he remained in the darkness, battling the desperate urge to run after her and confess everything. That night, Hiroshi wandered the streets of Seoul like a ghost. His steps led him unknowingly to the building where Mei Lin now lived. From the street, he could see the light in her window still on. Her silhouette moved behind the curtains, and he imagined her writing in that journal he had seen her buy. His phone vibrated. A message from Tanaka. "The executives from Tokyo are furious. If you don't return tomorrow, you'll lose the promotion, maybe even your job." Hiroshi looked up at Mei Lin's window one last time. He had to choose, the career he had spent years building, or this obsession that had consumed him. But it was no longer just an obsession. He had fallen in love with the woman he had helped shape, and now he had to face the consequences. In her apartment, Mei Lin was writing in her diary. "Dear Diary, today I felt something strange during my performance. It was as if he was hurting with me. There's something in this silence that unsettles me. Why would a man who clearly cares about me hide so much? Maybe he's afraid he's not enough for me. If I could say one thing to him, it would be this: I don't care who he is or what he looks like. I just want to know the heart that beats behind this generosity." The cafe was unusually empty when Mei Lin arrived for her performance. James seemed nervous, constantly checking his phone and avoiding eye contact. "Is everything okay?" Mei Lin asked, noticing the tension in the air. Yes, it's just that." James paused, struggling with his conscience. "Mei Lin, there's something you need to know about." "About what?" A new voice echoed from the shadows. Hiroshi stepped out of his hiding place, his face pale but determined. Time seemed to stand still. Mei Lin looked at him, her eyes shifting from confusion to recognition, and then to something deeper. "You," she whispered, her voice barely a thread. "You are." "I'm Hiroshi Nakamura," he said, his voice broken by emotion. "And I've been lying to you since the first day." James quickly apologized and stepped away, leaving them alone in the cafe that had witnessed as many lies as it had truth sung. Mei Lin studied him intently. He was exactly as she had imagined, elegant, with eyes that held secrets and a sorrow she recognized because she carried it too. "Why?" was all she could say. Hiroshi stepped closer, as if afraid she might vanish. "Because the first time I heard you sing, I felt my heart beat again after 2 years of silence." He told her everything, about Yuki, how her voice had reminded him he could still feel, about the desperation that led him to create such an elaborate lie. "I lost the woman I loved in an accident," he said, his words choked with emotion. "Yuki was a pianist, and after her death, music became torture. Until I heard you." Mei Lin remained silent, processing every word. Her eyes filled with tears, but not from sadness, rather, a deep understanding. "So all of this, the money, the performances, my new apartment, it was all a lie?" "No," Hiroshi answered firmly. "My love for your music, my need to save you, my desire to see you bloom, that was never a lie. The methods were wrong, but the feelings..." "The feelings were a lie too," Mei Lin interrupted, her voice now stronger. Because I fell in love with a ghost, with someone who didn't exist. Hiroshi felt the world crumble beneath his feet. Mei Lin, please. No. She raised her hand. I need time to think. I need to understand who I am without your lies, without your money, without this life you built for me. She walked toward the door, but stopped. You know what hurts me the most? It's not that you lied to me. It's that you didn't believe I could love you without all of this. And with those words, Mei Lin walked out of the cafe, leaving Hiroshi alone with the echo of his own betrayal. 3 days had passed since the revelation, and Seoul seemed to have lost its color. Hiroshi hadn't slept, hadn't eaten properly, and had ignored Tanaka's increasingly desperate calls. Mei Lin had disappeared. She wasn't at her apartment, hadn't returned to the subway, and James had told him she left the apartment keys with a simple note, I can't live a lie anymore. Guilt gnawed at Hiroshi like acid. He had gone back to the cafe every day, hoping to see her, but the place felt empty without her presence. The owner told him a young Chinese woman had come asking for waitress jobs, but there were no vacancies. Mr. Nakamura, Tanaka's voice pulled him out of his thoughts. His assistant had flown in from Tokyo, something he only did in extreme emergencies. Tanaka-san, Hiroshi replied without looking up from his desk. The executives have made a decision. Either you return to Tokyo immediately and focus on your work, or you will be transferred to the Busan office with a significant pay cut. Hiroshi finally looked up. What if I quit? Tanaka stared at him incredulously. Quit? Over a street singer? Don't speak of her like that. Hiroshi's voice sounded dangerous. Nakamura-san, you're destroying your career for a fantasy. This obsession. It's not an obsession, Hiroshi interrupted. It's love. And yes, maybe it's love born of desperation, maybe it's love built on lies, but it's real. He stood and walked to the window. But you're right about one thing. I can't go on like this. I need to find her and make things right, or I need to let her go completely. That night, Hiroshi walked the streets of Seoul, visiting every place where he had seen Mei Lin. Finally, his steps led him to the park where they first met, when she was still singing in the subway. And there she was. Mei Lin was sitting on a bench, watching the lake where ducks swam peacefully. She wore simple clothes, her loose hair moving with the night breeze. She had her guitar but wasn't singing. I was hoping you'd come here, she said without turning around when she felt him approach. Why here? Hiroshi asked, keeping his distance. Because this is the only place where we were honest with each other, even if we didn't know it at the time. Hiroshi sat at the other end of the bench, respecting the space between them. I've been thinking, Mei Lin continued, about what you said, about your girlfriend, about why you did what you did. And I realize that we've both been living with ghosts. You with the memory of Yuki, me with the hope that someone could love me unconditionally. She turned to look at him for the first time. But ghosts can't truly love, Hiroshi. And I need something real. What do you need for this to be real? Hiroshi asked, his voice full of a vulnerability he had never shown before. Mei Lin studied him silently. Despite everything, she still felt something for him. She wasn't sure if it was love or just the remnants of what she'd felt for the man in the shadows, but there was something genuine in his desperation. I need you to be honest with me about everything. Not just about the lie, but about who you really are, she finally replied. Even if you don't like what you find? Especially if I don't. Hiroshi nodded and began to speak. He told her about his childhood in Tokyo, about the pressure from his family to be successful, about how he met Yuki at university and how she had helped him find his passion for music. After she died, I became obsessed with work. It was the only way to not think about the emptiness she left behind. But that turned me into someone cold, calculating. And with you I felt again. But I didn't know how to separate my genuine feelings from my need to replace what I'd lost. Mei Lin gently plucked the strings of her guitar. I have to be honest with you too. Part of me was drawn to you even before I knew who you were. That night in the park, when you talked to me about music, there was something in you I recognized. What? Loneliness. The same loneliness I've carried my whole life. They sat in silence, listening to the sound of water and distant traffic. What happened to your job? Mei Lin asked. I lost the promotion. They'll probably transfer me to Busan or fire me. Don't you care? Hiroshi looked at her directly. Not anymore. I realized I'd been chasing success to fill a void that no professional achievement could ever fill. So what are you going to do now? That depends on you. Mei Lin stood and walked to the edge of the lake. Hiroshi, I need you to understand something. I can't be your salvation, just as you can't be mine. If we're going to try this, it has to be because two whole people decide to love each other, not because two broken people are trying to complete themselves. Are you saying there's a chance? I'm saying I want there to be one. But we need to start over. Completely over. She turned to him, her eyes shining with determination. I want you to meet Mei Lin, not the woman you saved. And I want to meet Hiroshi, not the man who created a fantasy life for me. How do we start over? Mei Lin smiled for the first time in days. We start with honesty. I go back to singing in the subway, but because I choose to, not because I have no other options. You decide what to do with your life based on what you really want, not what you think you should. And us. We get to know each other like we should have from the start. No lies, no fantasies, no trying to save one another. Hiroshi felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Real hope, not built on lies or obsessions. Can I ask you something? He said. Anything. Would you sing for me? Not as a paid performance, not as part of a farce. Just because you want to. Mei Lin took her guitar and began to play. This time, the song wasn't about unrequited love or mysterious men. It was about second chances, truth, two souls finding a way to heal together. 6 months later. The small cafe in Hongdae was packed to the last seat. Mei Lin was on stage, her guitar gleaming under the soft lights, singing a song she had written that week. Her voice had gained a new depth, a confidence that came from truly knowing herself. At a table near the stage, Hiroshi watched her with a proud smile. He no longer hid in the shadows. He had learned to love her music without possessing it, to support her talent without controlling it. After the performance, Mei Lin came over to his table. How did you like the new song? She asked, sitting down across from him. I loved it. Especially the part where you talk about finding your own voice. Literally and figuratively, she laughed. The past months had been transformative for both of them. Mei Lin had returned to singing in the subway, but now it was an artistic choice, not a necessity. She had started writing her own songs and had gained a small but loyal group of followers. Hiroshi had quit his job at the record label and opened a small independent recording studio. It was less glamorous than his previous work, but it allowed him to work with emerging artists and help them find their authentic musical voice. Do you regret it? Mei Lin asked, taking his hand. Regret what? Quitting your career for this. Hiroshi gently squeezed her hand. Mei Lin, I didn't quit my career for you. I quit a life that wasn't mine to find one that was. And what did you find? I found that real love isn't about saving someone or being saved. It's about choosing to grow together. Mei Lin smiled. You know, there's something I never told you about that first night in the park. What? When I saw you approach, I wasn't afraid. I should have been afraid of a stranger coming up to a woman alone at night. But something about you calmed me. What was it? Your eyes. They had the same sadness I saw in the mirror every morning. But they also had something else. Hope. Like you believed healing was possible. Hiroshi brought her hand to his lips and kissed it softly. You were right. Healing was possible. Just not the way I thought. How then? We heal when we stop trying to fill our emptiness with other people and start creating something new together. The cafe began to empty, but they stayed seated, simply enjoying each other's company. Do you know what I like most about us now? Mei Lin asked. Tell me. That when you look at me, you don't see the woman you saved or a replacement for what you lost. You see me. And when you look at me, you don't see a mysterious benefactor or someone who can fix all your problems. You see me. Exactly. They stood up to leave, and as they walked through the streets of Seoul, Mei Lin began humming a new melody. What's that? Hiroshi asked. A song about new beginnings. About two people who met in the darkness and decided to create their own light. Can I hear it when it's ready? Of course. But this time, you won't have to hide in the shadows to listen. Hiroshi laughed, a sound that had become more frequent in recent months. No more shadows. No more lies. Just us. Just us, Mei Lin repeated, and for the first time in their lives, both felt those words meant exactly what they sounded like, a promise of authentic love, built on truth, sustained by the daily choice to choose each other. The future stretched out before them, uncertain but full of real possibilities. And for the first time, that was enough.